If you can get these 3 things right, then your Mandarin skills will skyrocket and you'll reach fluency in no time. My name is Ace, I speak 4 languages, and last year I placed 2nd in the Global Chinese Bridge Chinese Proficiency Competition. I've been learning Chinese for about 4 years, and in that time I've reached an upper intermediate or advanced level. But when I started out, I really had no idea what I needed to do to start. In this video, I'm going to try to condense down all of those years of experience into 3 key tips that I wish I knew when I was starting out, in the hope that they accelerate your progress. Number 1, the main thing is to just start. The biggest problem I see people face when they start learning Mandarin is getting caught in analysis paralysis. That means many people get caught in the trap of spending too much time trying to find the perfect resource or the perfect method. I'm here to tell you that what matters the most at the beginning is simply starting. It's all too easy to get caught up in that trap of waiting, delaying the first start date because you want it to be perfect, and then you find out that months or even years have gone by and you've done nothing. Here is a simple 5-step plan to help you solve this problem and go from inaction to action. Pick a start date. Choose a date that's going to be the day that you start learning Mandarin or start learning Mandarin again, and write it down in the calendar. This is D-Day. And then stick to it. Choose a beginner resource. The problem facing you is not the difficulty of finding a resource to learn Mandarin. In fact, there are plenty of them out there, and there is an overabundance of resources that you could use. So your challenge becomes finding one and sticking to it. So what you need to do is you need to spend an hour or a couple of hours looking at the resources that there are out there and choosing one and committing to working with it from start to finish. To put it briefly and simply, what you want to look for in a beginner resource is something that is for beginners, so it's level appropriate, and it preferably has both written and audio content. Beginner textbooks are great for this. Choose a time to study every day. It's better to do a little bit of study every day than a whole bunch of study on one day of the week. So for example, if you do 30 minutes of study every day of the week as opposed to 3.5 hours on a Sunday, it's better. Also, what you want to do when you're implementing this new habit of learning Mandarin is anchor it to a pre-existing habit. So for example, if you eat breakfast every morning or you drink coffee every morning, one thing you could do is you could say, okay, this new habit of learning Mandarin is going to be immediately after drinking coffee or finishing breakfast. And that way you might get 30 minutes of study in every day. Or for example, if you're a full-time professional, what you could do is you could arrive at work 30 minutes earlier, book yourself into a meeting room, and then before the day starts and you get interrupted, you get 30 minutes of Mandarin study in to start your day. Get social accountability. Once you've decided when you're going to start learning Mandarin, what resources you're going to use, and when you're going to study each day, what you want to do is you want to share this with someone. So with a friend or a family member, let them know that you're interested in studying Mandarin, the reasons why you're interested in learning Mandarin, and what your plan is for studying Mandarin. Let them know when you're going to start and request that they follow up with you a couple of days after the start date to see how you're going. That way you'll have social accountability and you'll be much more likely to follow through on your plan. Seek consistency. One of the biggest problems we face when learning Mandarin is not figuring out what to do, but actually doing it. And this is still one of the biggest problems I face today, motivating myself to get up every day and put in the work. Learning a language is a lot more simple than you think. You need to read a lot, listen a lot, write a lot, speak a lot with feedback. The challenge is not figuring out that this is some big secret, it's actually putting in the work every single day and motivating yourself to do this over the long run. So your task at the beginning is to build a new habit learning Mandarin and to be kind to yourself during this process. It's hard, it's a new skill, you will get there. 千里之行，始于足下. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Are you willing to put perfectionism to the side so that you can start your journey towards Mandarin fluency? 2. Read and listen to interesting and level appropriate content. The primary thing that you should do to study as a beginner is read and listen to Mandarin. A lot of people refer to this as getting comprehensible input. The idea is that you acquire language through understanding it. So by reading and listening to beginner Mandarin material and trying to understand it, you will improve your comprehension skills. Now, as a beginner, it's kind of difficult to just read or listen to Mandarin because you don't understand any Mandarin yet, so none of it's understandable. That's where the distinction between intensive and extensive study or intensive and extensive reading becomes really useful. Intensive study is more like a depth approach. It's where you read something and you try to understand all of it and break it down, and everything that you don't know, you look for an explanation to understand the text. This can be useful and it can be a primary mode of study when you're a beginner in order to understand things. So for example, you might be working with a beginner textbook, you might have a passage with audio and written text, and you go through line by line, and with the aid of vocabulary and grammar explanations, you understand the text gradually. And then what you could do once you have a general gist of the text is you read it over and over until you understand it and can read it relatively relatively fluently. And then you might read the text and listen to it at the same time to build a connection between the written and spoken language, and then eventually just listen to the text. That could be intensive study. Extensive study is more like a breadth approach. It's more relaxed, it takes less energy, and therefore you can do more of it, expose yourself to more language, and start building speed and fluency at your current level. Essentially, the idea is to take content which is relatively easy for you to understand without too many new things that are difficult for you, and to do lots of reading and lots of listening. That way you start building speed and fluency at your current level. The problem is, as a beginner, there isn't too much material which is appropriate for you to study extensively, because everything is new and everything is quite difficult. One way to get around that is to extensively study material which you have previously studied intensively. What do I mean by that? Well, you might have studied a textbook passage intensively and therefore made it something which is relatively easy for you to understand now. So you might read or listen to it extensively to reinforce what you've previously learned. There is another thing called graded readers, which are also great for extensive reading. What you can do with those, because they are simplified books classified by language level, is you can just read them in your downtime for pleasure reading and build reading fluency. 3. The principle of specificity. You get good at the skills that you practice. It's quite simple. If you want to get good at listening and reading, you've got to do lots of listening and reading. You want to get good at speaking and writing, you have to do lots of speaking and writing with feedback. Most people, they want to be able to have conversations in Mandarin. So what skills do they need to practice the most? They need to practice conversation skills, that is listening and speaking. So one way to do this is to do lots of listening, like we've discussed previously, but also to get lots of speaking practice with feedback. So one thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to find a language exchange partner or a tutor who's very patient. They can modulate their language difficulty so that you can understand, and they can give you feedback when you make mistakes. That way you will progress fast and build the skill of output, not just input. If there's anything that you're struggling with learning Mandarin, let me know in the comments and I'll try to make a video on it. Also, if you found this video useful and you've watched until now, then you might find this video on beginner Mandarin learning resources useful too.